obeisances, all glories to Srila Prabhupada and Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. So today we will be discussing this verse from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Chapter 4, verse number 20. And so we'll read the verse first. Karma pravrittam janavrittam apiritam vede vivityo bhayalingam ashritam virodhi tad yoga padeka kartari dvayam tatha brahmani karma narchati. Karma pravrittim janavrittim apiritam vede vivityo bhayalingam ashritam virodhi tad yoga padeka kartari dvayam tatha brahmani karma narchati. One more time. Karma pravrittim janavrittim apiritam vede vivityo bhayalingam ashritam virodhi tad yoga padeka kartari dvayam tatha brahmani karma narchati. Synonyms, translation, and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. Karma, activities. Pravrittim, attached to material enjoyment. Cha, and. Nivrittim, materially detached. Api, certainly. Ritam, true. Vede, in the Vedas. Vivitya, distinguished. Ubhayalingam, symptoms of both. Ashritam, directed. Virodhi, contradictory. Tat, that. Yogapada, ekakartari, both activities in one person. Dvayam, two. Tatha, so. Brahmani, in one who is transcendentally situated. Karma, activities. Narchati, are neglected. So translation. In the Vedas, there are directions for two kinds of activities. Activities for those who are attached to material enjoyment, and activities for those who are materially detached. In consideration of these two kinds of activities, there are two kinds of people who have different symptoms. If one wants to see two kinds of activities in one person, that is contradictory. But both kinds of activities may be neglected by a person who is transcendently situated. So purport. The Vedic activities are so designed that the conditioned soul who has come to enjoy the material world may do so under direction so that at the end he becomes detached from such material enjoyment and is eligible to enter into the transcendental position. The four different social orders, Brahmacharya, Grihastha, Vanaprastha, and Sannyasa, gradually train a person to come to the platform of transcendental life. The activities and dress of a grihastha or a householder are different from those of a sannyasi. One is in renounced order of life. One in the renounced order of life. So sannyasi is in the renounced order of life. It is impossible for one person to adopt both of the orders. A sannyasi cannot act like a householder, nor can a householder act like a sannyasi. But above these two kinds of persons, one who engages in material activities and one who has renounced material activities, there is the person who is transcendental to both. Lord Shiva is in the transcendental position because, as stated before, he's always absorbed in the thought of Lord Vasudeva within himself. Therefore, neither the activities of the grihastha nor those of the sannyasi in the renounced order of life can be applicable for him. He is in the Paramhamsa stage, the highest perfectional stage of life. The transcendental position of Lord Shiva is also explained in Bhagavad Gita 2.52 to 53. It is stated there that when one fully engages in the transcendental loving service of the Lord by performing activities without fruitive results, one is elevated to the transcendental position. At that time, he has no obligation to follow the Vedic injunctions or the different rules and regulations of the Vedas. When one is above the directions of the Vedic ritualistic injunctions for attaining different allurements and is fully absorbed in the transcendental thought, which means thought of the Supreme Personality of Godhead in devotional service, one is in the position called Buddhi Yoga or Samadhi ecstasy. For a person who has attained this stage, neither the Vedic activities for realizing material enjoyment nor those for renunciation are applicable. So we'll go with the prayers. Stop share. ॐ अज्ञानतिमिरान्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरुवे नमः श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूपा कदा मह्यं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकं वन्देऽहं श्रीगुरो श्रीयुतपदकमलं श्रीगुरून् वैष्णवांश्च श्रीरूपं साग्रजातं सहगण रघुनाथान्वितं तं सजीवं साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजनसहितं कृष्णचैतन्यदेवं श्रीराधा कृष्णपादान् सहगण ललिता श्रीविशाखान्वितांश्च हे कृष्ण करुणा सिन्धु दीनबन्धु जगत्पते गोपेश गोपिकान्त राधाकान्त नमोऽस्तु ते तप्त काञ्चन गौराङ्गी राधे वृन्दावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये वाञ्छाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्य एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद हरे कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे नारायणं नमस्कृत्य नरं चैव नरोत्तमं देवीं सरस्वतीं व्यासं ततो जयमुदीरयेत् नष्टप्रायेषु भद्रेषु नित्यं भागवत सेवया भगवती उत्तमश्लोके भक्तिर्भवति नैष्टिकी कृष्णाय वासुदेवाय देवकीनन्दनाय च नन्दगोपकुमाराय गोविन्दाय नमो नमः ॐ नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय ॐ नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय ॐ नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय Hare Krishna. So we'll read the purport one more time. In the Vedas, there are directions for two kinds of activities. Activities for those who are attached to material enjoyment and activities for those who are materially detached. In consideration of these two kinds of activities, there are two kinds of people who have different symptoms. If one wants to see two kinds of activities in one person, that is contradictory. But both kinds of activities may be neglected by a person who is transcendentally situated. So today I will speak again on this wonderful topic again of Srimad Bhagavatam. Yes, I am not qualified to speak on such great transcendental topics, but of course, to please my Guru Maharaj and serve the Vaishnavas for the pleasure of the Vaishnavas, I will speak something for my own purification. So just to recap a little, Daksha here had performed this grand sacrifice where so many great sages and demigods, everyone was present. And Lord Shiva was also there, present. He was uninvited, but because Sati, she really wanted to meet her relatives. She was thinking, what is the harm in going to the father's house uninvited? So, Lord Shiva was never invited because Daksha, who is Sati's father, he never liked Lord Shiva to begin with, just because of who Lord Shiva was, right? He lives in this crematorium. He smears ashes on his body. He wears garland of skulls around his neck, and associating with ghosts and goblins. So Lord Shiva was not even invited because Daksha didn't like him. Um, and of course, he was also envious of him. So then Lord Shiva, still went because Sati convinced Lord Shiva to go. Then when in the assembly of the sacrifice, when Daksha, he came, Lord Shiva, he didn't rise up um, because of his absorption in the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord. And out of Daksha's pride and envy, Daksha cursed Lord Shiva. And now Sati is saying, that she's going to quit her body because she heard this blasphemy of her husband. And now she's telling her father of these great qualities of her husband in this verse. And so we'll be discussing that, what are these great qualities and how are they great? So she's saying that there are two kinds of, activities that are prescribed in the Vedas. So one is for the, one type of activity is prescribed for those who are materially attached to this material enjoyment. And the second type of activity is for these people who are materially detached. And she's saying that you can't find both of the qualities in one person because they are both contradictory. However, she's saying that Lord Shiva, he belongs to none of these because he is on a transcendental platform and he's transcendentally situated. So she's telling this to her father. So now I just wanted to discuss how, is Lord Shiva in this transcendental position. Because Lord Shiva, he's not acting for material sense enjoyment. So that's the pravritti marga that this text is talking about. Neither he's acting out of material renunciation or this nivritti marga, but instead he's acting in relation to the Supreme Lord. And Lord Shiva is always absorbed in the thought of Lord Vasudeva, even though externally we see that he lives in this crematorium. He smears ashes on his body. He associates with ghosts and goblins, and he has a wife and a family. So this is called, because him having a wife and a family, externally we can see that this is the pravritti marga. But again, internally, he's in this constant samadhi. So as we said, he's married, but he's not married to enjoy with his wife. He's not even attached to his wife, right? There's a story of like how he just gives up his wife because someone had asked him to give up his wife. But on the other hand, he's also not a sannyasi, of course, because he has a wife and a family. But instead, he is above both of these types of people or the activities. The purport in this text really explains how an ordinary person, right? Daksha, we can consider as this, even though he was a great person, but he's thinking in very ordinary terms. Sati is telling Daksha here that the ordinary person can't understand or see the pure devotees of the Lord who are transcendentally situated, because ordinary person takes a lot of things, at face value, or just superficially. So, for example, we can't see a pure devotee yet who he is very rich or he seems to be performing just normal activities like anyone else. We can't judge that he could be a pure devotee just by his external activities because internally he could be completely absorbed and doing everything for the pleasure of his Guru Maharaj or for the pleasure of Vaishnavas or for the pleasure of Krishna, right? So in the Vedas, it says that the Vedas doesn't discriminate anyone. And of course, in 15:15 Bhagavad Gita, we know that the purpose of Vedas is to really understand Vishnu or Krishna. So in Vedas, even though there's these both types of activities that are prescribed for different types of people, so it doesn't discriminate anyone. So example, if one is completely absorbed in material sense gratification, The Vedas doesn't just disregard, tell them to disregard or stop that enjoyment. Rather, it tells them to regulate this enjoyment. And this is because by regulation, slowly this consciousness gets purified. So, it reminds me of this Bhagavad Gita verse 4.18. If you want to just read this, I thought it's a small text so we can read. Okay, so it says 4.18, Karmanya karmaya pashed akarmani cha ya karmaya sabuddhiman manusheshu sayukta krishna karmakrit. So it says that one who sees inaction, inaction, and action and in inaction is intelligent among men, and he's in the transcendental position, although engaged in all sorts of activities. So Prabhupada is explaining in this purport that a person acting in Krishna consciousness is naturally free from the bonds of karma. His activities are all performed for Krishna, therefore he does not enjoy or suffer any of the effects of work. Consequently, he is intelligent in human society, even though he's engaged in all sorts of activities for Krishna. So karma means without reaction to work. The impersonalist ceases fruitive activities out of fear, so that the resultant action may not be a stumbling block on the path of self-realization. But the personalist knows rightly his position as the eternal servitor of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, he engages himself in the activities of Krishna consciousness. Because everything is done for Krishna, he enjoys only transcendental happiness in the discharge of the service. Those who are engaged in this process are known to be without desire for personal sense gratification. The sense of eternal servitorship to Krishna makes one immune to all sorts of reactionary elements of work. So again, we can see that, this is saying how one can be performing any activities, but he could be still transcendentally situated. We see in the life of, another example in the life of Raghunath Das Goswami. He was born in a very wealthy family and he had everything for material enjoyment. But again, from the young age, he had no attraction to it. He wasn't attached to it. His desire was only to serve Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And after so many attempts, he was finally able to leave home and joined Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in Jagannath Puri. And even when he met, now, Lord is not telling, so Chaitanya Mahaprabhu isn't telling him to leave everything immediately. Instead, he is kind of instructing him to be steady and humble. So gradually, by the service, Raghunath Das Goswami became more and more renounced. And even though he was getting renounced, he wasn't internally thinking that he's renouncing things, right? He was just still thinking, how can I serve Krishna without any distractions? So externally, it seems like that, he could be he's a great renunciant, but internally, he was completely absorbed in devotion. So, he wasn't on path of the pravritti when he was this, very wealthy and rich. He was not also on the path of nivritti marg where he renounced everything eventually. But again, he was beyond both of these in pure devotional service. So just to really now, ask ourselves how I can imbibe this in my life. Let's say I have some attachment. So for example, that's the pravritti marga. So in order to elevate myself and detach myself from this attachment, I shouldn't just renounce it, but instead I regulate it, at least according to this Vedas, right? For example, if I love to eat some fancy food, and I love to eat so much of this food, it can be it's considered as on the pravritti marga. But then let's say I want to fast, I decide that I just don't want to think about this food and I'm gonna force myself to stop this. So I artificially detach myself which is considered this nivritti marga. But again, this will not last long. It can even cause frustration in my heart when I just stop something what I just was so attached to. However, if I somehow regulate this and bring Krishna in the middle, this is where the transcendence can begin. So now, let's say I love food and I love to eat a lot of food. So then I start offering, I start cooking for the Lord, for Krishna. And then I offer the food to Krishna and then I honor that prasadam. So slowly what this happens is just like the Yukta Vairagya, where, it slowly will purify my intelligence and consciousness. And then automatically, I would move towards renouncing, but not feeling that I'm renouncing. But it will, I'll have a little more intelligence to understand how this opulent food, makes me feel like I want to enjoy life, right? And how I'll understand that how eating too much, it makes me very tired, lethargic, sleepy. So naturally, because these are hindering me from performing the pure devotional service of the Lord, I would want to stop. And they naturally stop, right? It's not that I artificially stop myself. So the point here is that we should use everything that we have in the service of Krishna. We don't have to give anything up. For example, this Zoom platform that we were using, it is considered, and actually invented by a materialist. It's a material platform. But again, having this Srimad Bhagavatam class every day, listening to the Srimad Bhagavatam class, using this, is called this Yukta Vairagya. Same thing with the phone. If I have a phone, yes, it's a materialistic thing, but if I use it to, speak with devotees about Krishna Katha, if I use it to hear Krishna Katha, then again, that's called Yukta Vairagya. If I have a big house, I use it to invite devotees and host devotees. If I have money, I give it to support building temples. Or if I have any specific skill, immaturely, I use it to serve Guru and Gauranga and the Vaishnavas. So no matter what we're doing, externally, we can be living a normal life of work, family, responsibilities. But if internally we understand that we are doing this as a service to Krishna, then even those normal things and activities can become transcendent, or transcendence. So how can we think, we can ask that how can we think like this even while taking care of our family members who may not be, fully Krishna conscious yet? So that is by knowing that everyone is Krishna's children. And Krishna has entrusted me in serving these souls and his children. So, when we absorb in this kind of mentality, we have to understand, even to understand this, and feel that these are Krishna's children, we have to have our sadhana very strong. And what does that include? Which means like we have to chant properly with emotion and attachment. We have to hear Srimad Bhagavatam with feelings. We can't just hear Srimad Bhagavatam, we have to feel the personality. When we hear Srimad Bhagavatam about Lord Shiva, we have to really have this empathy to understand, the feelings of Sati, the feelings of Lord Shiva. And any stories, there's so many stories in Srimad Bhagavatam. When we hear this with feelings and emotions, that is when we can actually realize. I was hearing, His Holiness Radhanath Maharaj's class, and this is where he said that whenever we hear Srimad Bhagavatam or read Srimad Bhagavatam, we should have feelings, because bhakti is, knowledge realized in feelings, right? So, and of course, we have to associate with the devotees. Talk about Krishna Katha association doesn't mean just, meeting devotees, but we have to speak about Krishna, discuss, Krishna Katha. Discuss, when we meet devotees, we should ask, hey, tell me what you heard that was good, and recently or lately, what you've been hearing about. These kind of things we have to talk about. And then, this is when it's called the true association of the devotees. So again, coming back to our point here, when we do something for our own enjoyment, we will only get frustration because we will have expectations. When we do something for ourselves, we want, automatically there's expectations. So that's going to cause frustrations. But again, when we do things to please Krishna and Vaishnavas, then even our tendency to expect different things, for my enjoyment will slowly diminish, because Krishna cleanses our heart and our consciousness when we serve the Vaishnavas and do things for pleasure of, Guru and Gauranga. So, we don't become transcendental by rejecting the world or vice versa, enjoying in it. But we become transcendental by connecting everything that we have to Krishna. So with this, I would like to conclude. And if anyone has any comments, reflections, or corrections, please go ahead. Hare Krishna. If you don't have any...
Yeah, so very wonderful. So I don't have any questions, but also the points that you have made. Yeah, we have to be very conscious, and the Krishna Kada and all those things. I was joining a little late, so I couldn't completely listen. But thank you for the class.
Thank you, Mata. Thank you for sharing.
The story itself are filled with so much of nice emotions and loving things. Feelings, so we can't even go into the Bhagavatam. Each story is a different rasa, actually, and we can enjoy the stories. It is like a storytelling only, right? And also the questions and answers coming, and how Parikshit Maharaj stops in between whenever he has a question, and we have to go back again and review that.
Yes.
So
yes.
I like the process of this narration and going for back and forth on some. Just like we teach the kids the bedtime stories, it's like that.
Yes, yes. Agreed. Thank you, Mataji, for sharing. Hare Krishna. Okay, if we have nothing else, we can conclude here. Vanchakalpatarubhyasta cha kripa sindhubhya eva cha patitanam pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Anantakoti Vaishnavrinda ki jai. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna.